Welcome back to the Winning Season Pod. Denise, welcome to Winning Season.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Today, we are talking about standing in your powers. Denise is phenomenal. She created this deck, Stand in Your Power. When I got the text, I instantly read through the description and asked her if she would be a guest on the podcast. I guess we should start with how we met many moons ago.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
We kind of swapped cities. So I was living in Atlanta when I met you, and you had recently moved to Atlanta from New York.
Yeah.
Now you're there, and I'm in New York. So we flopped. What's your recollection of how we met?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to give a little bit of my background of why I moved down here first. So I
Yeah.
had been in New York City dancing. I was also working at Lululemon at the time, co-managing one of the largest stores up there. Had been in New York City to pursue a dance career, which I was fortunate enough to be able to, as a dancer, you gig. So I did a lot of gigs. Had an injury that sort of forced me out of that career, and I was looking at to what was next. So I had, long story short, now and with my husband was
It's a
down here.
podcast, so you don't have to make
I
a
just
long story short. You can actually give
I
us a little bit of tea.
there's just like so many branches right of the tree of the story. Okay, so I had been dating my now husband. We had gone to middle school and high school together. Hadn't dated then, but he was
What?
down
I didn't know
here.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend who I was working with at Lululemon in New York, who was also moving to Atlanta. It had never been on my radar. Just I don't know, just because it was sort of like New York or LA, right, or Chicago is the places to go for dance in the
Uh-huh.
U.S. or had considered places overseas. And when my friend I had shared that she was moving down here, I don't know why, but I was like, let me go through like my phone book, right? And just like anybody I know who's in Atlanta who I can connect you to. So I had reached out to my now husband, and at that time we had been keeping in touch just here and there, and I started communicating regularly every day, several times a day. And within 8 months, I was starting to look at, yeah, moving down here, and was at a position where I couldn't dance anymore. But had to make a choice whether or not to pursue it. I had to have a major surgery and decided to give it a shot. Lululemon was opening some stores here, so there was some opportunities here, and I thought, sure, I'll just do it. And so as I was making that move, one of the things I looked at was where are some of like the really interesting organizations or companies that are in New York that also have a presence in Atlanta that I would want to look at. And so the first one was actually Levo League, and you were a league chapter at Levo League. And I was laughing
Yeah.
because you were still in my phone as like Jacqueline Levo League for whatever reason. I was really bad at
I
changing
love
info.
that.
So yes, I think that was like the one of the first moments of, and I remember going to like a book club brunch with you, and I think we did a goal setting workshop at the Lululemon store. And yeah, so it's just
Yes.
amazing to be able to connect with someone and so to create right away.
For those of you who don't know, because my label life was so long ago, but it was a really important chapter of my life also. Label League was a millennial career women startup. They were based in New York, but there were chapters, I think, in 31 cities. And Maxie McCoy was the chapter curator. I call Maxie my fairy career godmother. So I was the Atlanta chapter leader for Lavo, and I was running average 2 to 4 events a month. But they only ask you to run one a month because it's a volunteer capacity. So actually, that role shaped my career because it let me know if I'm willing to spend my time and my own money to volunteer for an organization, this is a direction I want to shift to. So yeah, so I left CDC in part my program operations and global disease eradication immunization, the tongue mouthful, because of Lavo. But so I met you, and I remember one of the distinctive qualities about you that really stuck with me, and every time we connect, I think about is how grounded you were. And like you all may know this, but sometimes you meet a person and they just have really good energy, and you're like, oh, that's a cool person. Denise, you are one of those people. And that first impression has really stayed with me. And since I've known you over the years, have found that to be very true of who you are. So yeah, I'm glad we stay in touch. And thanks for giving us some of the backstory. Lululemon really has cranked out some really amazing leaders in all types of capacities. I know there's like controversy with founder story, but the actual people who ran those stores, I cannot tell you how many. I'm like, if somebody worked at a Lululemon, you definitely want to hire them for your team, or at least seriously consider them because they Yeah, are a powerhouse.
Yeah,
So,
and I can't speak to what they've been doing over the last 10 years just because I'm not aware. But when
yeah,
I was there, and I think this is one of the benefits that I experienced and being able to do this and dance in my career was they had a really big focus on personal development and leadership. And that has just always been something that I loved. And
yeah,
so was able to get a taste of running goal coaching workshops and talking about communication skills and perspective and all these things that now I think are a lot more common that you hear and see, but I think at the time was really unique. And
yeah.
I also just want to like say you have amazing energy and as well, and I always remember that too. Yes, and just like this such generosity that still shows up even in today in this podcast and inviting me here. So thank you.
Thank you. Big hugs. Sharing the
Yeah.
gratitude. I want to jump into the deck because you share a story that talks about the moment when something shifted for you. So you've talked about your dancing career, but you're also a business professional. You're a businesswoman and you've held many leadership seats and you set in executive functions across various organizations. So, kind of bring us to that moment, that story where the initiation for this deck happened.
Yeah, sure. So I had left a full-time role. I was a VP of actually customer success, support, and community. So very interesting. And I mean, I loved it, but it was just lots of things, right? Go into decisions about leaving a company.
Let's pause
Yeah.
there, if you
Okay.
don't mind.
Yeah.
Because what does that mean? That's a huge title, and I know what the work
Mm.
entailed, but I think it's good for context setting to talk about the scope of responsibility you held with.
Yeah, sure. So this was a personal and professional development company. So again, so that's right where my interest is. And
Mhm.
my responsibility was it was a mix of supporting right the product team and supporting the same general. I had a seat on the senior leadership team, so supporting that team with really the strategic direction around how we design things for our customers. And so partnered with product and marketing and sales. And then on top of it, yeah, my function was customer success, which really in my 2 year experience there was taking a high touch support team and transitioning them into a customer relationship management team. So going from just really being the team who could just support answers at any time, really, really reactive, but that higher level customer support to being more proactive with some limited tooling, but also some tooling changes. So overseeing that too, but being more proactive to manage retention for our membership products. We had a few different products. So it was also something experienced during that 2 years. It was a massive company ownership change and a product change and direction change. And it was an amazing experience. And then I also, yes, oversaw our general support, which again was just sort of like you had all those people who would jump in at any time depending on the question. So it was creating structure, it was creating tiers, it was creating growth paths, it was tech support a little bit just from a leadership component, not from a technical expertise component.
Yeah.
And then also some general support. And then the third was community. So that was all of our community groups. And we ran a lot of events and a lot of things like that where the community team continued to ensure there was a great experience. So it was more like experience, I guess, than the support and the success level. So yeah, that generally was what it was.
And then you post that role, you
Hmm.
find yourself in a position having conversations with a CEO and another senior leadership team. And there is a moment that you observed an opportunity to expand or shrink, and that led you
Yeah.
to this deck.
It did. It did. So I have a habit of being like, because I'm a Pisces, so it's funny that you say grounded, because I'm also like, I'm such a Pisces sometimes. But with that, it's this idea and this belief that I have around my own ability to be really adaptable and fluid with the way that things go. I'll roll with it. I like an element of structure, but I also tend to be able to be very flexible. And so this particular interview was, yes, with the CEO and another senior member. And the expectations that had been set was that I was giving a presentation and I had worked on a presentation. So I thought I was going into an hour long roughly call, 40 minutes, 45 minutes of a presentation. And I figured 15 minutes of interview questions. I personally prep and plan for 15 minutes of questions and 60 minutes of questions very differently. And so when we got to like, I thought, oh, we're doing the 15 minutes first. Okay, this is what's happening. Okay, it's 20 minutes. Okay, it's 30 minutes. And I didn't speak up. I didn't say anything in that moment. But yeah, I experienced myself trying to answer a question. And I framed this in the deck, the guidebook as well, like I was like molding the answer, not being dishonest, but not trying to give information they weren't looking for. But I already, my experience was transferable, but very different. So trying to also paint the picture for them without overdoing it. And I'm already not that concise. So like, I just like had this out of body of experience of just like answering things in just the strangest ways that weren't authentic to me, that didn't feel very effective or meaningful. And it wasn't probably in that moment that it clicked, that the realization that I was not standing in my power, that I wasn't grounded, that I was, again, like I felt very disconnected from who I was. It
Yeah.
was more in like as I was committed to observing and like trying to understand, process it afterwards, that's when it really clicked for me. All this adrenaline of just trying to get through that particular experience. And I took the time afterwards to, I went for a walk, because for me, like movement just helps. So for a walk, and then I journaled. And between the two of those, I was like, oh my gosh, I have all of these tools and I didn't use any of them. Yeah, go ahead.
So, one, I appreciate that you said movement and journal post experience because I know the winning season community. Many of us have found ourselves in a professional situation where we prepared for one thing, and then you show up and things start moving in a different direction. And because we're professionals, we're like, oh, yeah, we'll just roll with it. And in the moment, things happen so fast. It truly does. For the fact is when you're catching your breath, like, what the heck just happened? So I'm curious. The name of the deck is called Stand in Your Power. What does stand in your power mean, and what does it not mean?
Okay. Yeah, great question. Stand in your power. I think first and foremost, it means something different for everyone. But I think
Mhm.
that the through line for everyone is that we all, and this is a belief I'll say, but I really believe that we all have just incredible potential within us. Why I've always gravitated right towards personal development things, trying to, maximize my own, but also creating spaces for others too. And so I believe that everybody has this potential and a power within us, right? And that power, and I don't know that I quite have all of the words of power. I think it's so multifaceted what that means for each of us. But I think that when we get disconnected from it, instead of, for this example, this interview, instead of stopping at the 20-minute mark when I was like, okay, this is 5 minutes too many, right? I didn't expect this. Like saying, hey, we can continue I'm happy to continue to answer questions, but this
Yeah.
is sort of what I was expecting. I just want, to give you guys that information, and then, let's discuss, what we do from there, rather than me throwing it in at the end of the interview. Like, by the way, I thought this is what was going to happen, like that. I wasn't,
Yeah.
that just, it wasn't an effective way of being, I think. And I wasn't, I think part of it is like this level of presence and awareness that is connected to the idea of power that allows us to surface that. And then some of it, I think, is a habit, right? Of us rebuilding. There's lots of, I think, different explanations and stories around why this may happen for us or happen for us for women. And I think that regardless, that when we do listen, right, to ourselves, not in isolation, we don't live in isolation, we don't live in a vacuum.
Right.
So I think that's also part of like what it's not, right? It's not just in a vacuum and not just by ourselves. We are in relationship to everything around us. But there is something
Mhm.
about coming back to ourselves that I think is really, really.
Yeah, when I'm hearing you share this story, I think of the Layla Delia quote. And although this deck is for everyone, I just want to preface that this is not just for women. I am going to introduce gender just for this quote. The quote says, and she remembered who she was, and the game changed. Layla Delia, she's going to write a book about this, but I've always wondered when I saw that, what is that relationship to power? So I hope that she addresses that. What I appreciate about your deck is, yes, power means something different for us. And standing in the power and those power dynamics, they're fluid. So it's not a one size fits all. And I really appreciate that you go through 17 themes of power inside of the deck. Before I jump into those themes, you have a philosophy that you call and I think it's really important that we anchor into the and philosophy before we hop into the deck. Can you explain that?
Yes, 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 yes. And I'm glad you brought that up. One of, I think, the most important things to share about this deck is that it's not meant to be prescriptive. Part of that is probably personal. I don't like to be told what to do. So for me, I don't like to tell others what to do, right? But I
Yeah.
think that there is something, again, about like inspiring and influencing and engaging, right? There are these words that are related to relationship, right? How we relate to things around us, things and people, right? Not just people, but things too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there is, that's not prescriptive, they're suggestive. And so within that, it's also that sometimes they might feel contradictory. And I put that in that guidebook because I know that. I know that in some of these that you might take them at surface level for a moment and go, "Wait, but this quote is so different from this quote." Or I love this other quote that someone else has said or somewhere else, and it's been really, really important to me. Or let's take boundaries, right? For example. So boundaries, I think, is a
Ooh.
really good one
Yeah.
because I think that there are different ideas and best practices around creating boundaries that comes from our power, and not that one level is good or bad or better, but I think just as we grow, it changes. And as we interact with people, it changes. So there might be places, and I shouldn't even say like as we grow, I mean, that's one example, but there may be just different parts in our lives where it looks different. And some, yes, that saying no, that sort of like closing of the door is really important. And then sometimes there are other things at play when we close off, right? And sometimes that closing off actually does have us shrink instead of have us expand. So the boundary, and I don't have the quote off the top of my head, but the concept is actually more about how do you be beyond it so that you are
Ooh.
creating a boundary without creating division, right? More
Mhm.
division. There's lots of division in the world already. How do you create it expansively? But it is like a putting of things in perspective where that thing no longer bothers you, but it's not to a place where you have to close it out completely. Maybe it diminishes on its own.
Yeah. So that and is we can hold that duality of, yes, I need to have this no boundary, but also being aware to say, I can hold the no here, but I need to drop the no here so that it's not so restrictive. And what I think for myself, as you're describing this, moments where I've held a no boundary too long and it became self-sabotage. So
Yeah.
when I hear that and philosophy, it's like, yeah, this can be true and this. So figure out how to go in rhythm.
Yes, thank you for putting a stamp on that. Yes, there is a little bit of how do you exist with a healthy level of cognitive dissonance, right? As
Yeah.
part of that, where you're kind of holding two truths or potential truths or two possible ideas of, yeah, it can be this and it can be this. And how do you hold them both and then exist?
Okay, this is juicy. So let's dive into how the deck works.
Mm.
It's insight, inspiration, and integration. Can you walk us through the three I's?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've been inspired by so many different decks in life. And so one of the things I was thinking about, and true to how this idea, when it like really came to the forefront, just like you have to create this, was that again, I knew the things. And sometimes I know people do and people don't, or just different ways of framing things, right, can invite new ideas for people, new possibilities. So I wanted to embrace that in the insight card, right? To provide a level of sort of explanation or possibility for people. But then there's the integration piece, right? Which was the piece I was struggling with in that moment that a lot of times I think a lot of us struggle with, which is we hear the
Yeah.
thing, we know the thing, how do we put it into practice? And so I wanted to include that exact piece, that integration. And then I honestly just like quotes. Sometimes, right, you don't need the full, like, you don't need to reread the book. You just need like a couple like little snippets to go, oh, right, I remember that whole idea. I remember that whole concept, the whole experience, the whole story. But you just need something. Maybe it's a visual, maybe again, it's just a quote, but something that just like can trigger that memory of that learning or that aha moment. And so that was where, yeah, the structure of coming up with those three things came into play.
Okay, so we have the insight, we have the inspiration, we have
Correct.
integration. And now with that, that's how the deck is structured. There are five ways to use the deck. And can you walk us through that and spend some time on the circle part? Because I can already tell a lot of the audience could use circle in the workplace at like girls' night, at game night with couples. So let me pause. Can you give us the
Yeah.
five ways to use it?
Okay, yes. So first, these are all suggestive. Again, not being prescriptive in nature. And like this actually surfaced from one of the things I processed was I actually got feedback from several people in my network, and this came out quite a bit. Like, how do I use it? How do I do this? And so I was like, okay, let me yes, come up with some ideas. So one is there are 17 themes. They actually come in order, but in the guidebook, I do list them out, and
Yep.
each one is primarily the word or a version of the word is bolded, so it should be a little easy to know which is which.
It's
For
very easy to distinguish. So great
excellent.
design. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, and all the designs, like there are these nuances in the design that says this is an insight and inspiration and integration card, and then all the themes, right? The elements are similar. So try to give that like visual sort of subtle cue as well for people. But yeah, so the first one is really just moving through. And I'm actually going to pull my guide deck because I actually don't have this memorized. It's been a while since I put this to
Yep.
paper. But yeah, but I think moving through the theme, you could do all three of the cards right at once, spending a little bit of time on that lesson card, checking in with what comes up for you as you're reading it. Same thing that then the quote card, connecting that quote card to how your interpretation of the insight card is, and then practicing that integration. I don't know that I recommend, right, trying to do it all at once, but maybe taking a day or a few days, right, for each of the themes. So I think going through those, a lot of the integration is centered around checking in and reflection, but also some journaling. Some that, invite you to reach out to someone else and have a conversation about what you're thinking, feeling, or observing. So there's that too, right? Kind of break that barrier, getting outside of just ourselves again. So that is one. I also have, which I call the like on a whim method, which I do quite a bit. I did this before this call, right? Just to sort of
I
like,
actually did the on the one before the call too. Yay.
what card did you pick if you don't mind sharing?
I guess. Okay, so I pulled two and I'll just share them. I was hoping, sorry, podcast, for showing you the back of my hair, which is while I pull these cards, but I pulled confidence and celebrate, which I kind of mentioned to you a little bit of celebrate before we started recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, but those are my on the whim that I pulled. And it was two, and I didn't want to like push one back. I'm like, I'll sit with both today. I'll be the and philosophy, courage and confidence.
I love it. I love it. That's so fitting.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
mine.
celebrating confidence. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Mine was energy. So energy doesn't define you or control you. It invites you into awareness and
Mhm.
choice. Okay, so yeah, so that's one way. So it's like you could do in the morning, right, to set your day if you've got some type of daily routine, or before things like a call. So those are ways that I think I use it the most. Because again, it's just sort of flexible, it's easy, you just grab it. Another one I did, I won't go through each one, but I did a little bit of a guide for the elements. So the fire
Yes.
signs, the water signs, the earth signs, the air signs. So there's essentially a little bit of just some information right about the tendencies of that sign or what those signs are known for, and then what they could consider as they pull a card and they're thinking about the energy of that sign. Another one I have is a weekly spread. And so this one is very similar, right, to the day. But if I know some people like, and maybe it doesn't have to be a Monday, but whatever your start of the week is, or when you are kind of resetting on this like cycle of work or cycle of energy or the week, right, we can lay it out. And so one pull would be what theme or energy is guiding me this week, or you could say this cycle,
Yep.
what inspiration or mindset will help me stay aligned. And the third is what can I practice to support integration and growth? And so
Yep.
each of those cards, even though there's insight, inspiration, and integration, they can be used in all of those pieces. So they're meant to kind of stand on their own as well.
And also inside of the cards, once you all see the deck, one, they're absolutely stunning. The design, the quality is so good. Like, I don't know who your vendor was for this, but kudos to you because you nailed it. What I appreciate is the ability to do this at a self pace. Some of the integrations have questions, and it does require you to sit and be uncomfortable. And I'll tell you honestly, when I first got the deck and I went to the integration card, I pulled out my notebook and I got really uncomfortable about what might come up. So I decided to clean the baseboards. Who ever, who feels like cleaning baseboards, right? That's how I was like, oh, there's something juicy in this that I need to get to. If I'm defaulting, let me clean my baseboards, it's like I'm trying to avoid what this integration might bring up for me. So I then force myself, I sit down, fix a cup of tea, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna write, and everything starts coming up in my head. It's like every blocker that I could create for myself started popping up. And I thought, whoa, this is a really powerful tool, so much so that every distraction that I can create myself is coming up. So I was able to move past those distractions and sit with it and really face some integration about this phase of my life. So, as someone who has been a high performer and at times a people pleaser and at times addicted to success, I've had this season of recalibration for the last year. And recalibrating as someone, because you also have these, I'm not diagnosing you, I'm just saying we share similar
We do.
characteristics.
Yes.
Recalibration seasons can be scary for us because we don't know what's next. So, what I appreciated from the questions was it allowed me to surface those things that I had been moving really fast through or just simply avoiding. And then coming to the deck, I'm like, oh, there's a practice here. This is a way I can be mindful about this week. So, kudos to you on the design, but also I wanted to share if you get this deck, be committed to like going through the process and you don't have to do it all at once.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that first you experienced that you shared it and you got clean your baseboards because whoever cleans their baseboard.
Right.
My husband and I talk about that all the time. We're like, we need to do this, and no one ever does. But I think you called out so many amazing things, which is one, I mean, you also like celebrating yourself, right? You recognized, you saw the patterns in that moment, right, of distraction. And that's
Yeah,
also a really big win because there's probably been seasons in life, maybe not yours, but mine for sure, where I've not noticed those distractions, right? It's taken me
for
maybe like
sure.
several cycles of experiencing those before I go, oh, I'm in this other cycle of distraction. This is what I do, right? And sometimes those are the things that have gotten us to be successful, not necessarily in this moment, baseboards, but like, but you know, there are other things, right, that might get surfaced in your moments of reflection. And then for you to, yeah, to commit to having the courage, right? Taking the time to actually do that is huge. And knowing that it can be done piece by piece, that you don't have to do it, even if growth, right? I think many of us are, we want to be better, we want to grow, we want to be elevated. That's part of why we do this work. And there is also this sort of like surrendering to the timing, right? And the flow that just also comes with it, or that is required by it. And so it's really beautiful that you caught that. And thank you for all of the compliments. I'm so glad I wanted it to be inspirational and impactful for people, even if it's just one
And
person. Amazing, I won.
I want to talk about how to use this deck as a group or team practice because I've shared my personal story of personal integration, but I also see use cases for a team. And for you, as someone who's led different types of teams, I would love to get your perspective on how it can be used.
Yeah, yeah, and it's great that you ask. So I also have a form on the page where you can access the guidebook that does allow for people to just share if they're interested in something down the road, because I do see this as something that it can grow into, where it can be where there's a potential for like a community type space, yes, where we can go through this. So
Yeah.
I think it's one where, yeah, if you imagine a lot of times where we have retreats or events where you get people in a space where one, they're comfortable. I think a lot of times we find, sitting on the floor, but whatever, every space is different. But I think it's important to intentionally set up where everybody can see each other, where there is this like kind of more that feeling, right, of connection and unity. Probably practice a ground in the space first, but I think it could be really powerful to use it as a prompt for personal sharing and group discussion. As we've talked about, there are layers to what comes out of this card. And so that doesn't mean everybody has to go to the deep end right away, right? But
Right.
deep end can be later, right? Or
Yeah.
later in the conversation. As first the conversation starts, right? It might not be as deep. And so I think that the card can still pull out those great things. So I think that, yeah, that whether it is or using, right, all of the lesson cards, because those I think can spark reflection. Using the inspiration cards to really set the tone. Using an integration card to, again, like helping embody the practice. And that can be done smaller groups, like breaking out from that. It can be done all together. It can be done individually. So yeah, those are ways I guess I would envision that work being done.
Yeah, I can envision. I hosted a dinner series a few years back, 20 dinners around the world, 8 continents in 5 months. It was crazy fun, a high energy project. But I could see if I had these cards, I probably would have opened my dinners with maybe a quote and potentially sitting a quote at each person's table setting. And as our icebreaker, just having them share what comes up for them when they read that quote. So, as you said, you don't have to go to the deep end and be super vulnerable, especially if you're at a work retreat or you're just meeting all of your team members and you're doing a quarterly gathering. There's different use cases for this. So, we didn't talk about this yet, but I want to make sure we touch on it before we wrap our conversation. You're also a coach. Can you share more about your coaching practice?
Yeah, yeah, I am. So right now, I'm doing both group coaching through actually through an organization, and then I do private coaching, one-on-one coaching. My like whole thing is I recognized again part of just the self-discovery journey, right? I am multi-passionate, and I am not the only person.
Right.
So many people that I talk to, you included, right? There's so
Yeah.
many different interests and ideas and projects that we want to get involved in and things we want to do in life. And I am a firm believer in wanting to support people live these robust lives that they want to live, right, for them. Again, it's not for me to tell anybody how they should live, but I think it is about how to live these, I will say from love, like maybe that is the key thing. Like I'd love more light and love in the world, but aside from that,
Yeah.
but I think, but yeah, so I really what I do in coaching is to help people. One, I think clarity is a little bit of a buzzword, but I think that is one thing that comes up a lot of times for us, especially when we are multi-passionate, is
Yeah.
not just clear on like what I want to do, but what is the order of those things? How do I actually create a life that sustains, right, all of my interests? And again, not everything has to be done right now, but how do I create enough momentum where I'm able to sustain confidence, sustain commitment, sustain, clarity and continue to evolve. And so, yeah, I do a lot of, I guess another word for it is, right, it's a little bit of life design. So it embodies, right, all of the elements of life, everything from relationships to relationship with self to emotional life and your physical life. I'm also a part-time fitness coach, so I also bring a little bit of that into the space. And then, and of course, career and vocation and impact, and just like how do we live meaningful lives? There's no shortage of problems in the world, and so how do we show up as our best selves, right? To commit to helping, solve all of those problems. And so that's really what I do through coaching.
I really appreciate that your coaching isn't just tethered to one area because in my past chapter, I did coaching. And it's really one of those things. I came up in coaching during the era when people were like niche down and niche down and niche down, which I appreciate that I did. But what you miss with that type of coaching is that people are multi-passionate and multi-dimensional. So when you only specialize in one area, then it creates this tension where someone needs more coaching that is supportive of their full life experience, and that is what you bring. Also, you're doing fitness coaching also. I just remember the one time I came to your Pilates class. I brought one of my girlfriends, and when we got in the car, she was like, "You did not warn me how hard it would be. You're a great instructor." But yeah, I remember that moment. She was like, "That was really hard."
Funny. Yeah, yeah. I think it branches off of, right, movement of dance. And even though I don't
Mhm.
dance anymore, yep, I teach the Legree method. And I think you probably took was yeah, maybe like a Pilates slash bar class, but I do remember.
Yes, yeah, Pilates slash bar.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And it's so great, right? That's you again, like challenging yourself on another layer of your life, which there's a healthy amount of challenge that is good for us. And I think that is one. So thanks again for
Yeah.
supporting that way.
Yes. So I want to talk about, as we wrap up, what do you want people to walk away with knowing? And I know that there's this you are becoming element. So if you could also include what the you are becoming aspect.
Yeah, yeah, that's yes. That was, and I'll see if I can actually share it. It's also says in the bottom of the box. We can kind of see maybe.
Yes.
Okay, so in this, so part of that was my brand is Create Loudly, or Create Loudly Coaching. And it is, yes, I'm also creative. I think all of us, right, are creative to get a different level. I think, but I think we are creators of an element, a layer, some of our reality. Again, not in isolation because we live in this collective, but I think there is that layer of that. So for me, that's probably the card that makes me the most nervous or was about getting out into the world because that's a 53rd card. It's also not only in the bottom of the box, but it's also a card. And yeah, this is the path you seek is the one you're shaping, right? So choice by choice, breath by breath. You don't need to wait for permission, clarity, or perfect timing. It's all about, right, taking that first step towards whatever it is that you want in your life, what you want your life to be like, who you want to be like, how you want to show up, who you want to be when you're showing up. I am a little bit into the woo, so I'm really embracing a lot of we on some level attract who we are becoming. And so I think of a lot about as I have goals now, and I also I think hear it as other people talk about their goals, but I think about what does it take for each of us? Who do we have to be, right, to bring that thing into life, right? Or
Yeah.
to have that role or to have that relationship, right? You can't have a great relationship if you aren't committed to communicating clearly. Right. Clear communication is like a key part of relationship. And so I use it just as a small example, but for me, that becoming is that I think, right, I've decided that this is a new belief is like we're all in Earth School, right, for a reason. I get that from
Yeah.
Liz Gilbert. We're all here, right, on this journey, and we're learning. And so, if we're here, how do we make the most of it? And so that becoming is that we are always on a journey, and I think the more we embrace that journey and are intentional about that journey, then I really hope that people will find the fulfillment that they're looking for and are able to create and share the love and light out into this world that's needed.
And what do you want to leave people with at the end of this conversation as they consider getting their own stand in your power deck?
Yes, yes. Yes, I would love that. I'm gonna give we'll add I guess a special code maybe towards the end of I'll create that afterwards. But I'd love to yes to offer this community some free shipping and we'll figure out what else. But just as an opportunity just to help somebody maybe lower a barrier just to help people embrace the concept right of a new tool and hopefully a tool that not only they find interesting or inspirational or beautiful but that helps them supports them in integrating right some new ideas and concepts into their life as their journey and I just want the best for you.
Yes. So your website is Create Loudly, and where else can people connect with you beyond your website?
Yeah, I'm really terrible at Instagram, but I'm hoping to change that. But I do have an Instagram account, which is Create Loudly Co. So that's got the CO at the end of it for company or coaching. And then I'm also personally on LinkedIn. So of course, if people want to connect with me, just send me a personal message that you heard me, on Jacqueline's podcast, so I kind of know where you're coming from. But yeah, feel free to reach out. My email address is also info@createloudly.com. So that's also a way happy to chat or if there are questions about the deck.
So you all can just slide down to the show notes of this episode and you can connect to the Create Loudly Co Instagram, to Denise's LinkedIn, to the website and the email address as well. And then also the special offer. This episode is going to be released April 26th. I know it will live forever. So take advantage of the offer that she gives really quickly. If you're listening to this in 2028, that offer has expired.
Probably, yeah.
So I just want to preface that this doesn't live forever. All right, Denise, thank you so much for making time. I'm so glad that you put this deck into the world and you took that moment of that boardroom and you didn't just sit with it or have a moment of regret that you didn't speak up. You actually alchemized that moment and you created something really powerful that can inspire others. And the thought behind it, the intention, the design, how we can use it for ourselves and in a group is I'm so proud of you, like beyond. I can't wait to see you again so I can like give you a big hug and celebrate you in person.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you for your generosity. And this has been such an amazing opportunity. So I so appreciate you.
Of course. Okay, winning season. Until next time, continue to emulate excellence and eliminate excuses.